Learning objective 4 is to show the effect on net operating income changes in variable costs, fixed costs, selling price, and sales volume. Let's take a look at different scenarios. For changes in fixed cost and sales volume, what's the profit impact if racing bicycle can increase unit sales from 500 to 540 by increasing the monthly advertising budget by 10,000? In the case here, total sales change, variable expenses change, contribution margin changes, unit contribution margin, no, fixed expense, yes, because monthly advertising budget increased by 10,000. We can use contribution income statement to show the change here. This is original 500 units, and we'll use this as benchmark. So here for increased units from 500 to 540, and we can calculate the total sales. Total sales, 500 selling price per unit multiplied by 540 units, and we can get total sales 270,000. Total variable expenses calculated by 300 variable expense per unit multiplied by 540 units. You can get 162,000. The difference is contribution margin, 108,000. Fixed expenses increased from 80,000 to 90. 80,000 plus 10,000 advertising, or get 90,000. And subtract fixed expenses from total contribution margin, you'll get 18,000. So you can see here, even though sales units increased from 500 to 540 and total sales increased by 20,000, however, net operating income decreased by 2,000. So RBC will not increase advertising budget by 10,000. And we can also use a shortcut to calculate. Here, we can just calculate increase in contribution margin using unit contribution margin. Unit contribution margin 200. We multiply by increased sales units, 40 units. So we can get increased contribution margin 8,000. For advertising expenses, increased by 10,000. So decrease in net operating income, you can see here, that's negative 2,000, which means an increase in contribution margin is more than offset by the increased advertising cost. This is incremental analysis. Second case, change in variable costs and sales volume. What's the profit impact if racing bicycle can use higher quality raw materials? That's increasing variable costs per unit by $10 to generate increase in unit sales from 500 to 580. Here, total sales change, variable expenses change, contribution margin, unit contribution margin change as well, but not fixed expenses. Let's take a look at the calculation. Here, the increase column, 580 units. So we can calculate total sales. We use 500 selling price per unit multiplied by 580 units. You can get total sales 290,000. For total variable expenses, recall that the original variable expense per unit is $300. Now it increased by $10. So variable expense per unit is 310 now. We use 310 multiplied by 580 units. You can get total variable expenses 179,800. The difference is contribution margin minus fixed expenses. Fixed expenses do not change. So we can get net operating income 30,200 compared to 20,000. It increased. Here, sales increased by 40,000 to 90,000 minus 250,000. And net operating income increases by 10,200. So this is a good decision. Case 3. Change in fixed cost, sales price, and volume. What's the profit impact if RBC cuts its selling price $20 per unit, increases advertising budget by 15,000 per month, and increases sales from 500 to 650 units per month? Here, sales change. Variable expenses, contribution margin, and unit contribution margin, and fixed expense all change. Let's take a look at the calculation. Based on increased units sold, 650, we can calculate the total sales. 650 units multiplied by 480. How can we get the 480 here? The original selling price, 500 per unit. And now the company cut its selling price $20 per unit. So the new selling price per unit is 480. So 650 times 480, you'll get 312,000. Variable cost, $300 per unit times 650. You get 195. The difference is contribution margin. And we minus increased fixed expenses. Originally 80,000, but now the company has increased advertising budget by 15,000. So 80,000 plus 15,000, you'll get 95,000. And subtract 95,000 from total contribution margin, you'll get net operating income 22,000. In the case here, sales increased by 62,000. Fixed costs increased by 15,000. Net operating income still increases by 2,000. So those are good decisions as well because operating income increases. Changing variable cost, fixed cost, and sales volume. What's the profit impact if RBC pays $15 sales commission per bike sold instead of paying salespersons flat salaries, which currently total 6,000 per month, and increases unit sales from 500 to 575 bikes? Total sales change. Variable expenses, contribution margin, unit contribution margin, and fixed expenses, they all change. Let's take a look at the calculation. Increased unit sales, 575. Total sales is calculated by selling price per unit, $500, multiplied by increased units sold, 575. And we can get total number here, 287,500. For variable expenses increase by $15. This is sales commission per bike. And the original variable expense per unit is $300. Now, the new variable expense per unit is $315. So to calculate the total variable expenses, we use increased units, 575 multiplied by 315. And we can get 181,125. The difference is contribution margin, and we minus fixed expenses. Fixed expenses decreased by 6,000. Here you can see, because the flat salaries for salesperson 6,000 replaced by $15 sales commission per bike. So here, fixed expenses dropped from 80,000 to 74,000. Operating income increased 32,375. So here, total sales increased by 37,500. Fixed expenses decreased by 6,000, but operating income still increases by 12,375. Changing regular sales price. If RBC has the opportunity to sell 150 bikes to a wholesaler without disturbing sales to other customers or fixed expenses, what price would it quote to the wholesaler if it wants to increase monthly profits by 3,000? Well, to figure out the question here, we need to first understand what's to be covered by wholesale price. Variable cost, fixed cost, profit. Variable cost, yes. Fixed cost does not change. Profit, yes. Here, we can use incremental analysis. We just take a look at 3,000 profit RBC wants to achieve, and we divide it by 150 bikes. That's specifically for wholesaler. As long as each bike, RBC can earn $20 profit, then RBC can achieve its target. For fixed expenses, no change, because this opportunity, it's one time, and there's no change in the cost structure. For variable cost per bike, 300. As long as the selling price is 320 per bike, then the company can increase monthly profit by 3,000. And we can verify using the proof here. We use 150 bikes multiplied by 320 per bike, and minus total variable costs. Total variable costs is calculated by 150 times $300, and net operating income increases 3,000. Let's first take a look at learning objective 6, and then we'll go back take a look at learning objective 5. It will be more intuitive to understand. Learning objective 6 is to determine the level of sales needed to achieve a desired target profit. Let's still use RBC as an example. Suppose RBC's management wants to know how many bikes must be sold to earn target profit of $100,000. What's your suggestion? All those information same as before. Selling price per unit, $500. Variable expenses per unit, $300. Fixed expenses, $80,000. Unit contribution margin, $200. We can calculate number of units must be sold to achieve our target profit using either equation method or formula method. For equation method, this is the equation. Profit equals unit contribution margin multiplied by Q. Here Q is a quantity sold, minus the fixed expenses, and we can solve Q from this equation. Or we can use formula method. We transform this equation. We rearrange Q from right-hand side to left-hand side to get unit sales to achieve the target profit. This is a Q. Q equals target profit, here, profit same, plus fixed expenses divided by unit contribution margin. This is formula method. Let's first use equation method to solve Q. How many bikes must be sold to earn target profit of 100,000? From the equation here, we know profit should be $100,000, unit contribution margin $200. We want to solve the Q, fixed expenses 80,000. So we replace this equation by numbers. $100,000 equals $200 multiplied by Q minus 80,000. And we can solve Q should be 900. Or we can use the formula method to solve Q. If we use the formula, then that's very straightforward, because unit sales on the left-hand side. So unit sales should be equal to target profit 100,000 plus fixed expenses 80,000 divided by unit contribution margin $200, and you can get 900. So 900 bikes should be sold to earn a profit of $100,000. We can also calculate dollar sales to achieve target profit using either equation method or formula method. These are equation method and formula method to figure out Q, quantity sold. From the first equation here, we can rewrite this equation as the third one. Profit equals contribution margin ratio times sales minus fixed expenses. This is the equation method to figure out dollar sales. From the second equation here, we can rewrite this one as the fourth one. Dollar sales equals target profit plus fixed expenses divided by contribution margin ratio. This is the formula method to find out dollar sales. Let's take a look at how we can rewrite these equations to equation method to formula method to calculate the dollar sales. Here, for the first equation, for unit contribution margin multiplied by Q, we can divide it by sales and multiply by sales. Those two cancel out. Unit contribution margin multiplied by Q is total contribution margin. Divided by sales is contribution margin ratio. That's why unit contribution margin times Q can be transformed as contribution margin ratio times sales. From the second equation to the fourth one, here's the proof. For both left-hand side and right-hand side of formula method to calculate unit sales, we multiply by selling price per unit. And then for left-hand side, unit sales times selling per unit is dollar sales. For right-hand side, we rewrite selling price per unit as this. And then we can rewrite the denominator as contribution margin per unit divided by selling price per unit, which is contribution margin ratio. That's why we can get right-hand side as target profit plus fixed expenses divided by contribution margin ratio. This is the formula method to calculate the dollar sales. Of course, from the dollar sales equation method, we can also get the formula method. We can rearrange sales from right-hand side to left-hand side to transform the equation from equation method to get formula method. Let's take a look at RBC example. Suppose RBC management wants to know the sales volume which must be generated to earn target profit of $100,000. Using the equation method, we write the equation here. profit equals contribution margin ratio multiplied by sales minus fixed expenses. Profit here is $100,000. Contribution margin ratio, recall that it's 40%. We want to solve sales dollars and fixed expenses 80,000. So we can put numbers here and solve this equation. Sales should be $450,000. For formula method, we can get dollar sales directly based on the formula 100,000 plus 80,000 divided by contribution margin ratio 40%, and then we can get the same number. Now we can take a look at learning objective 5. Determine the break-even point. We can also use two methods, equation method and formula method. Keep in mind, break-even point is profit equals 0. Let's take a look at RBC contribution income statement and all those basic information same. Selling price per unit $500, variable expenses $300, contribution margin per unit $200, and then for contribution margin ratio, which is 40%. Okay, now for equation method and formula method, we can solve Q, which is quantity, and sales, which is dollar amount. For break-even, profit should be 0. We can set it as 0. See? So that's very straightforward. For equations here, target profit is 0. And then we can use equation method, formula method to calculate either quantity sold or dollar sales. Let's take a look at it here. For equation method, for RBC company, suppose RBC wants to know how many bikes should be sold to break even, and we set profit as 0, unit contribution margin $200, fixed expenses 80,000, and we should solve Q. Q is 400 bikes. For formula method, target profit is 0, so only fixed expenses and contribution margin per unit. We can get unit sales directly, 80,000 divided by 200, and we can get 400 bikes. For dollar sales, equation method, contribution margin ratio times sales minus fixed expenses, profit 0. We want to solve sales. So contribution margin ratio 40% and fixed expenses 80,000. So we can solve sales from this algebra equation here, which should be $200,000. For formula method, that's very straightforward. We use fixed expenses divided by contribution margin ratio, 80,000 divided by 40%. We can get dollar sales $200,000.